Well, I didn't think I'd be the one to make this video considering my initial reaction to Malenia couldn't possibly have been more negative. I was fully on board with the Malenia hatred. I basically just ditched the fight completely, I figured it wasn't worth my time, but then I came back to it later and eventually beat it. And the more I did the fight, the less I hated it, until at a point I started liking it, and then loving it, and now it's in my top 10 favorites across all Souls bosses. How did we get here? Why do I now think she's amazing? Why do so many others continue to despise her? Well, that's what we're gonna discuss today. And the point isn't to say,
it's hard, you just hate hard. Stop playing Souls and stop posting to YouTube.
But to look at it from different angles, cause there isn't one right answer, I feel. First, I wanna tackle some complaints I completely disagree with. Number one being that Malenia allegedly breaks the rules of the game. And I've seen this so much everywhere, people saying she's a cheat, doesn't play by the rules. But what rules? Who makes these rules? Who says she has to follow these rules? Well, a lot of people seem to get this idea from the video titled, Malenia doesn't play by the rules. Now, the guy who made this did his homework regarding her moveset and stats. All that is completely correct as far as I can tell. It's just the conclusions are completely opinion-based. He believes the boss's ability to cancel stagger animations is an inherent flaw, but that's just his preference. And since he uses Frida as comparison, so will I. Frida has basically the same idea behind her staggers. If you hit her at her neutral, which is when she's not attacking, she will always stagger and get hit. She often dashes back immediately with hyper armor, so even if you do hit her again, she might not react to it. Malenia does pretty much the same thing, except she's blocking while doing so and can do it immediately upon the first hit that lands on her. But that's only for light staggers, which comes from lighter weapons like straight swords. And she still takes the full damage from that first hit. The damage is only reduced if you hit her while she's already blocking. With bigger weapons, she can't cancel stagger. This makes it fair to me because the weapons with long recovery animations won't get you immediately punished. It's not like you whack her in the face, she decides to immediately ignore the stagger and hit you while you're still recovering from that big whack you just pulled off. You're not punished for hitting her at her neutral, it's only a maneuver that's there to keep you on your toes and ensure you can't R1 spam her to death, which honestly was a problem with some of the other humanoid bosses. The video also states that the games are built on the cornerstone of animation commitment, and thus when a boss starts an animation like a stagger or an attack, they must finish it. But that rule is only true for the player. Bosses have never followed the same rules as the players, unless they're literally the player character model like Gideon. If you want more of that style of gameplay and balance, you'll probably enjoy PvP more. Most bosses obviously don't stagger at all, it's only select humanoid bosses that do, like Frida, Lady Maria, etc. So they're already breaking the rule by not getting staggered in the first place, aren't they? But why is it bad for a boss to be able to cancel staggers if they still take the full damage? It's only punishing if you're recklessly spamming or doing a long weapon art combo, which is your own fault at that point. Which you can see in the video, by the way, like, when you get hit here, that's completely your own fault. And there are examples of bosses who can not only cancel stagger, but cancel getting hit in the first place. Though mostly this is seen in Sekiro, with Ishinashina being able to just dodge your hits if he's neutral, or Inner Father disappearing instead of getting hit. Sure, it's a different game, but I see it as a footnote in FromSoft evolving boss design, and I personally encourage them to keep making dynamic bosses who react more to what you're doing, and that's been the direction they've been heading since Bloodborne DLC. Even if Malenia is the only boss in the series who can, upon hit, change the stagger into a backwards dash animation, why is this a bad thing? Why is having a different behavior on a boss such a terrible thing? You just need to adjust to it. I see a lot of these complaints about Malenia breaking the rules comes from not new players, but Souls veterans who are used to Dark Souls 3 bosses, who are far more simple. They just do an attack and then you punish. It's fine if that's more your style of boss, but not everything revolves around that same design philosophy. It seems a lot of these people are either unable to adjust to Elden Ring bosses, or they refuse to, because they don't agree that they should have to. And I'm sorry, but I think that's on you, not the game. And if you think the OG Dark Souls never broke its own established rules, I think you need to look back at it again. What made Dark Souls 1 so memorable for a lot of its most famous and infamous moments was exactly when it broke its own established rules. All of a sudden, chests can eat you instead of being looted. All of a sudden, enemies can infinitely respawn. All of a sudden, you can't hit the enemies without a consumable. And so on. There are countless examples, even extending to the boss fights. So sure, Malenia is a bit different in how quickly she can recover from light staggers, but as long as your damage dealt isn't ignored and you aren't punished with an unavoidable, unreactable attack, I don't see what the issue is, honestly. Now, in her phase 2, this move turns into a little spinny kick, and he thinks this further proves his point, but personally I just see it as another checkup on reckless aggression. If you go one hit at a time, you'll never get caught by it, regardless of which weapon you're using. He showcases it hitting him while he's dual-wielding halberds and using multi-hit weapon arts. Again, this is completely his own fault for doing so. You could just use one halberd, you could just use better weapon skills. Like, I'm not gonna use Black Flame Tornado on a boss and then complain that the boss didn't let me finish the cast unharmed. For most of the footage he's dual-wielding, and that's the one and only niche scenario where these specific blocks and kicks could be seen as slightly unfair, but even then, it's only for specific dual weapons and only for specific attacks on those specific dual weapons, like the running attack with double halberds. Every other attack lets you fight the boss just fine, so I don't see this as being a very compelling argument unless you're dead set on doing a power stance halberd running L1 only run. He establishes how hyper armor works and then kinda glosses over the fact that she's consistent in that aspect, so that he could instead focus on how he's annoyed that you can't poise break her while she's doing a hyper armor attack, such as the Waterfowl dance. Sure, I think I would prefer if she was poise breakable even when she's doing those moves, but I see this as a very mild issue. There's plenty of times where you can do your big heavy hits safely, you just have to earn them, so just don't waste them on her when you're unsure if she'll hyper armor through it or not. So that's that video more or less, not gonna go through every single point and stat, so let's look at what you guys have to say in the comments. I find the fight to just be unfair and not enjoyable at all. My biggest gripe with bosses in Elden Ring is they just keep attacking as if they have infinite stamina. I don't think this is true. In phase 1 she's pretty passive if you create distance, and even if not, I think the pace is enough to let you build your stamina back up before you need to use it again. Maybe if you never level up endurance it's problematic, but if I'm doing just fine with a colossal axe, I think you should be okay. Phase 2 she's much more aggressive, but it's balanced out by the long pauses while she flies up in the air and slams back down, as well as the Aeonian Bloom, which might as well be just a lunch break for the player. I like to recklessly massacre my opponents, and she's the boss where it just doesn't work. I am forced to play defensively, and that's not fun for me. There's two very solid ways of engaging this boss, I feel. One is to be very defensive, stay out of reach of her long combos, bait her to do the thrust attacks and such, and the other is to be extremely aggressive, like I usually am. You're encouraged to do one or the other, since she has a few of these swift double strikes that you won't be able to iframe if you're at medium range straight in front of her. You need to either dodge into her if you're close, or backwards if you're already at a distance. She has plenty of other moves that encourage aggression, particularly in phase 2, where she'll either do the butterfly explosions, or if you try running away she'll instead do the swift slashes. So no, I don't think you have to be defensive at all. People really don't understand how bad the Malenia fight really is. FromSoft pulled some really nasty garbage to make her fight as hard as it is. She is rife with broken mechanics like having unbreakable poise and super armor from frame 1 of her attack animations, and being able to instantly cancel her light stagger animation to the degree that you're putting yourself at a significant disadvantage if you aren't using heavy weapons against her. She can even chain attacks together with 0 cooldown frames between them, leaving no openings and carrying the super armor and poise all the way through. It's not the healing on attack or the speed that's the problem. It's that the only time you can even attack her safely is when she's able to punish you. It's a giant middle finger to the mechanics of the game and not something people should be praising, unless they want more of this trash in the future. Yes, please? I feel like this person, along with many others, seem to apply the Dark Souls 3 strategy of waiting politely for the boss to be done with their combos. That's a mistake. You aren't given openings, you make them. Hit her while she's doing her attacks. Remember which moves you can interrupt and which you can't, and you can turn them against her. Like I said, I feel like many Souls veterans had a rough time adjusting, and I see them complaining more than new players. And clearly some people don't appreciate how she instantly has hyper armor for some moves and not for others. And I don't understand this complaint at all. This is nothing new. They've had this since Bloodborne. They've had it in Dark Souls 3. They have to add these hyper armor moves so you don't just keep interrupting every single move they do, because then there's no boss fight. It's just a punching bag. I find it a lot more engaging when you have to create these openings by striking at the right time, and not while she's doing a hyper armor move. Now, I've been white knighting Malenia this whole video so far, but there are complaints I do agree with. Mainly, Waterfowl dance and Lifesteal. Scarlet Rot is often brought up along these complaints as well, but only ever as a side note. So here's my side note on it. It's barely a part of the fight. I think I've gotten the ailment a total of 2 or 3 times of fighting her, and this is not me being a god gamer. It took me hours before I beat her, and it was rarely an issue. It's just there for thematic purposes. She's the goddess of rot, so I think that's fine. But Waterfowl dance, that was the one thing that would always halt my progress, not Scarlet Rot. Now, is this an unavoidable attack? Are there unpreventable scenarios where the move is straight up undodgeable and bullshit? Not really. You can always just run the opposite direction and jump, even if you're up in her face when she starts it. The uneven ground can sometimes fuck this up, but in that instance the move is still avoidable if you kinda circle around her awkwardly. So it's not complete bullshit. But is it good? Does it improve the fight? I really don't think so. I can dodge it fine most of the time, but I don't think it's satisfying enough to warrant the learning experience, which wasn't enjoyable. It's a poorly telegraphed attack. It's just a spammy flurry where you can't even process what's happening. How are you supposed to know how to dodge it? You'll either eventually luck out and figure it out by trial and error, or like me, you ended up looking it up elsewhere. Also, her phantoms in phase 2 are kind of the same thing. There's no way you're gonna know what the fuck you're supposed to do when you first see it. The difference is, though, that I find it very fun to dodge nowadays. But when you couple those attacks with the lifesteal and her enormous health bar, I can definitely see Malenia being a frustrating experience the first time around, because it absolutely was for me. She is an optional secret super boss, the ultimate challenge in the game, with a checkpoint right outside the fog gate, so I don't think the trial and error aspect ruins the fight completely, and if you find her to be too much like I did, you can just leave her for later. Again, like I did. And speaking of the lifesteal, I never even think about it these days. It's just there to force you to be aggressive when you're trying to learn the fight, and I'd say that's a fine idea on paper, but losing progress on her health bar was just so disheartening that I again don't think it was worth it. It might not matter to me anymore, but it never added to the fight either. And as many have pointed out, her healing even through 100% block shields is straight up bullshit. What life is she stealing? I think the amount of health she has is overall fine once you've learned to work around her lifesteal, but I do wish there was a bit less phase 1 and more phase 2, because that's where the fight elevates to god tier levels of fun for me. But I often spend longer on the intro phase, which is good, but she's far more passive and the music is just ambient noise to me, so I'd rather spend that time in the second phase. So do these issues ruin the fight? If you're someone who just plays these games maybe once or twice and doesn't really want to experience ball-aching difficult fights and just wants to beat the game, it very well could, and it has. And it's completely valid to complain about it because you can't expect everyone to spend countless hours learning her like I have. I'm personally someone who loves replaying these games, often solely for the boss fights, and she's one of the bosses I'm always looking forward to. Because when people say she's boring and easy outside of just the waterfowl dance and lifesteal, I honestly think that's just to cope. Thing is, I think many just find her to be too frustratingly difficult for those two issues, and they'd rather tell themselves that the fight is poorly designed and dull even outside of it, because that's easier to do than admit you're just doing it wrong and missing out on an otherwise great boss, and then they wave around an imaginary rulebook that FromSoft has never established to exist. There are no rules. If you never break these established quote-unquote rules, the games are never gonna evolve forward. I want new mechanics, I want bosses to be able to do things they were never able to do before. It keeps things interesting. I don't want the same boss over and over. And outside of Waterfowl Dance being annoying and Life Leech being kinda unnecessary, I think Malenia does succeed. She has one of the best designed base movesets I've seen in any of these games, and I've already shed light on a lot of the main reasons why. The way she rewards positioning, how you have to find your own openings in the middle of her combos, how the fight is balanced with light staggers only appearing for light weapons, how many positional combo modifiers she has. It's just an incredibly dynamic fight. On top of being really cool, she's like a butterfly Uber AIDS goddess from a painting come to life. I absolutely love her fights, but it's a shame not everyone's going to share my experience because FromSoft put a lot of roadblocks along the way. So I hope I did a well enough job explaining my perspective without being too disrespectful or condescending. I do acknowledge some of the validity in the complaints about her, but I hope you can see why I'm able to enjoy her nonetheless. So that about does it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.